from everyone knows from Madrid. So he's going to talk about on shape coexistence and different shapes from a shared model perspective, I guess. So please, Alfredo, all yours. Thank you.
Well, first, let me thank you for inviting me to this very interesting meeting in these difficult times. And I hope I will touch some of the points that were hot in the air. And you will see, I'll try. I think what I'm going to say is somehow provocative, but this will be a
provocative
bit.
Is
so
good.
Let's move to my sharing, which is here with this share. Is the screen okay?
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, so this is it. Shape coexistence in nuclei, the outline of my talk. See if I can move that. Sorry, what is it? Something. Okay, this moves now. These are my collaborators in these different works, and this is the outline. I will go to very basic point of view of the simple views of the complex system, which is the nucleus. Then I will deal with the quadrupole interaction and the idea of concept of shape, of nuclear shape. And I will give an example, fully work example of shape coexistence concentrated in nickel 68, which is the portal of one island of inversion. And then I will go to the meaning and limitation of nuclear shapes when seen in the laboratory frame, which is the reality. The experiments are in the laboratory frame, and we'll see what can we say. Okay, I will, as the last part is the most provocative, I will put the conclusions at the beginning just to give you, let you some taste of the outcome. I will use the quadrupole invariance to the limit to answer the question, do the intrinsic shape parameters beta and gamma survive in the laboratory frame? And the answer is that beta is rather soft and gamma meaningless in most cases. Then I will play with semantics to tell you that double magic nuclei are not spherical. And I will come back to nickel 68 to give you a new vistas on shape coexistence and how can coexist shapes which do not exist. And I will touch the point of rigid triaxiality in germanium and selenium 76. And the answer is that rigid is not terribly rigid. You will see. Then go to simple views of a complex system. In a nutshell, you have two basic players in the nuclear dynamics, the spherical mean field, the monopoles, and the multipole. The monopole is the part of the Hamiltonian that this gives an energy to a certain configuration. You don't mix, and the monopole is inert in this sense because you cannot mix with this Hamiltonian different configuration. It is the multiple Hamiltonian which is responsible for the collective nuclear behavior. It is universal, it is well given by the realistic nuclear-nuclear interaction, and it is relatively simple. You have pairing, quadrupole, octupole of very simple nature. This is already a way of making the nuclear interaction simple. Whatever you do, at the end of the day, if you take Kuo Brown old style of or valence space in medium similarity normalization group matrix elements. This is the underlying structure. And this is what will tell you which is what will be the manifestations of the nuclear dynamics in a particular nucleus. This is the monopole Hamiltonian, can be written in this way, where you see that essentially in the monopole Hamiltonian, what can be written as something which contain effective single particle energies. So the monopole Hamiltonian is giving you the shell evolution when you add neutrons and protons in your valence space. And indeed, the monopole Hamiltonian can produce these different spherical mean fields in a single nucleus for different particle hole configuration with respect to the normal field. This is the configuration-driven shell evolution that, in the language of Taka Otsuka, is type 2 shell evolution. All in all, this is the message. The message: the monopole Hamiltonian is the control parameter of the nuclear dynamics, and the universal multiple terms, pairing, quadrupole, whatever, led or not to collectivity, depending on the structure of the spherical mean field around the Fermi surface. In Andrés Zucker words, multiple proposes and monopole disposes. And this is the message. Large-scale cell model calculation solve the many-body problem in valence space chosen as to contain the relevant degrees of freedom. And we use realistic or phenomenological effective interaction. Realistic interaction are derived from the free nuclear-nuclear interaction and nuclear-nuclear-nuclear interaction in different ways. The ab initio way was described by Jason, and is the valence space in medium similarity renormalization group. But at the end of the day, you have a two-body Hamiltonian in the model space. No? As I will concentrate in shapes, I will concentrate in quadrupole shapes. There is a question: is why the quadrupole correlation thrive in the nucleus? And there is very basic reason. One is the fact that the spherical nuclear mean field is close to the harmonic oscillator. And the harmonic oscillator has a dynamical symmetry, which is SU3. And in the generators of SU3, there is the quadrupole operator. So the mean field is well adapted to one interaction. It will enhance a quadrupole interaction, and this is seen in Elliott's model, which can be solved analytically and tell you that if you have a degenerate monopole field and an attractive quadrupole interaction, the many-body problem has an analytical solution in which the ground state and the bands on top of it are deformed, maximally deformed, and all this without in the laboratory frame. This is very elegant and is at the basis of our understanding of a lot of nuclear physics. But it happens that the quadrupole is stronger than just Elliott because it also thrives in other situations. And you have two interesting limits. One is pseudo SU3, in which you have only a part of a major oscillator shells, and another limit is quasi-SU3, in which your valence space contain the quadrupole partners of a big orbit. You have the big orbit, and you have the partners are delta J equal 2, and delta J, delta L equal to, sorry, there is a mistake here, because they are connected strongly by the quadrupole operator. For instance, some examples of quasi-SU3 multiplets are F7 half, P3 half, G9 half, D5 half, S1 half, etc. And in pseudo SU3 will be, for instance, in the PF shell, everything except the aligned orbit. No? Okay, these are the players of the quadrupole game, and then we come to the nuclear shapes. To speak of a shape, you need to define an intrinsic reference frame, breaking the rotational and or reflection symmetry, and you rely in semi-classical models all the time to speak about shapes, because you use the parameters that describe the surface of a drop, and these are the famous beta and gamma. And the question is that how do you relate these parameters in the intrinsic frame with the laboratory frame? And we will see in the second part of the talk that the way to do that is use the quadrupole invariants, Kumar, Klein, etc., to characterize the nuclear shapes in the laboratory frame, which is the only one which is real. But for the moment, let's move to an example of shell model calculation in far from stability in a candidate to double magic nuclei, which is nickel 68, to get contact with experiment and reality. Here you have a plot of the islands of the landscape with the islands of inversion at n equal 40, n equal 50, n equal 28, n equal 20, n equal 8, and probably there is also at n equal 14 another one. So we have an archipelago of island of inversion at our disposal, far from stability. But let's concentrate for that only just pictorially concentrating, for instance, in chromium 68, that should be a semi-magic nuclei. You have always the competition between the normal filling that will make chromium 64, for instance, semi-magical and not interested at all, and intruder states makes of particle-hole correlations. And indeed, you lose monopole energy when you promote particles across a cell closure. So you, in principle, lose energy. But then this open cell configuration, if they are extremely correlated, can gain a lot of correlation energy. And in some cases, like in chromium 64, this is enough to make the deformed solutions irrest. And this is how you make these islands of inversion out of this competition between intruder deformed states and normal filling states. Well, for the description of nickel 68, we take a valence space with two major shells that I have sketched here, and we have an interaction, and what we get for nickel 68 is a nice example of coexistence of things. Here in the calculation, I compare the shell model results with the experiment. You see that the agreement is extremely good, and the interpretation at the end is that the ground state is a closed shell. So the ground state of nickel 68 will be double magic. Then you have a kind of oblate structure here with the first excited 0+, and a prolate structure here with the lowest 2+ excitation. No? This is the standard view of nickel 68, and I call that the portal to the island of inversion because this prolate structure, when you remove particles, protons in this case from nickel 68, will go down in energy and become the ground state. And this is seen in the calculation and in the experiment, and I will show you that in this graph. This is the shape transition at n equal 40. These are the 2+ excitation energies, and these are the B of E2s. And then as you remove particles from nickel, the 2+ plumbers, really, you have in iron 66, you go from 2 MeV to half an MeV, and this continues in chromium 64, and you bounce back when you move towards calcium 60. And indeed, we had a prediction for titanium 62 that has been really experimentally fulfilled to our great pleasure. If you look to the other drawing, you see the inverse behavior for the B of E2. You have a small one for nickel, you go really up for iron and chromium, and you bounce back till calcium 60. So this is a nice example of this coexistence we are talking about. And this measure of the titanium 62 is very recent, and Liliana Cortés is the main responsible of this measure. Okay, so we arrive to the second part, quadrupole invariance. Here, the only rigorous method to relate the intrinsic parameters to laboratory frame is through the quadrupole invariance. And to compute from this quadrupole invariance beta and gamma, you need to know the second and third moments of the quadrupole operators. And this is implemented in codes, relatively well known, but what is maybe new is that you can compute the fluctuations of these parameters, but for that you need to compute the fluctuation, the sigmas, and as you see, you need the fourth moment and the sixth moment, and indeed, if you as you have mixed stuff, in reality you need also the fifth moment. So you need everything, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. And you can wonder, well, that's horrible to compute, but we have all the details are in this reference, recent paper, but we have devised a very simple way to compute that with the Langston's projected strength function method. So we don't need to go into states that are physicals and many, but we can just acting with the operator in an adequate way, we can get mathematically exact solution for all these moments. So all the details are in this publication. And then we can relate, obviously, the moments and the betas, etc., and compute the fluctuations in beta and gamma with these formulas, which are not very complicated, and we obtain quite interesting results. What I have here is a list of nuclei with the betas, the delta beta, which is the 1 sigma, and the gamma and the delta gamma. And one thing that you realize here is that beta well, it has a delta beta which is sensible, but never small. For instance, in chromium, which is a well-deformed 48, you have 0.31, 0.06, which is soft. Yeah? But what is more surprising is that the gamma range is of 20 degrees. 20 degrees is almost one half of the sextant of the gamma. Remember that gamma goes from 0 in this convention from 0 to 60. And I have here a double magic nuclei, which is silicon 34. And then you realize that the delta beta is compatible with beta. First is double magic, beta is not 0, and the delta beta is commensurable with the beta, meaning that probably beta makes no sense at all. Okay, if I move up, I have here several examples, and I go back to nickel 68 to come back to the interpretation of this shape coexistence. But while I repeat that, what I said at the beginning, beta is soft, gamma is extremely soft. The gamma fluctuation amount to 20 or 30 degrees. In some cases, the oblator prolate character survives. In others, both sectors of the beta gamma sextant are equally probable. A technical note is that beta and gamma only have a small fluctuation when the nucleus approaches the SU3 limit, and this is probably the case in heavy, well-deformed nuclei, which are approaching also the semi-classical limit. So this is maybe more for shell model-like. Well, they are well-deformed, but I cannot say what happened in the rare earth, don't worry. A bit of semantics. Are double magic nuclei spherical? They are not spherical because they have no shape. And there is no spherical nuclei at all because they have no shape. This is a quantum system, and either you can speak of a shape or not, and in this case you cannot. No? For instance, double magic nuclei like calcium 48, if you compute the real beta, is different from 0 with a large incertitude, but it is not 0, and it is spanning gamma from 0 to 60. It covers everything. Okay, so this is somehow discomforting, but we maybe just need to redefine the names we use for something. Well, as I promised, I will come back to the shape coexistence in nickel 68. You realize that I haven't put here for the ground state spherical, but closed shells to be consistent with myself. And then we'll see what the Kuman invariants tell us about the three zero pluses. And here I will use what I have named K plots. K is for Kuman plots for nickel 68. And here you have the K plot for the ground state. The dot is the central value of beta and gamma, and this shaded area is the 1 gamma, the 1 sigma, sorry, span. As you can see, you're really covering everything except the spherical point, as a matter of fact. But you cannot speak really about the shape with this so big a dispersion. Go from 0.05 to almost 0.2. So, well, this is one of the conclusions. If you go to the oblate 0 plus, you see that you have a large span, but around 0.2. So at the end of the day, this is beta soft and extremely gamma soft. So you cover almost 40 degrees in the beta gamma plane. So, well, what to do with that is just to know that it is like this. So this degree of freedom is to be taken with many grains of salt. Similarly for the prolate, which this time is has a smaller span and at least remains all the time in the prolate side, but with a huge fluctuation in gamma. These are the main. I have another examples like zinc 70, where you have the point in the center with gamma equal 30. You will say this is really a rigid triaxial, but you discover that you can go 20 degrees in the prolate sector, and almost 20 or 15 degrees in the prolate sector, and 15 degrees in the oblate sector. So, which is the meaning of that is difficult to name these behaviors. And I finish because I'm almost in my time, showing what happens in germanium 76, where we have made a calculation that reproduces perfectly the experimental data, many experimental data, the B of E2, the deformation is the correct one, and everything. And using the invariants, we have a beta which is well defined, 0.25, 0.03, and gamma is centered at almost 30, but the best we can have is a span of almost 20 degrees. So with this span of 20 degrees, which is seen here, well, if you want, this is, you can call that rigid if you want. I will call this beta soft and gamma soft, probably not dramatically soft, but indeed quite soft. And just with that, I finish saying that this fluctuation may challenge or establish ideas about shape evolution, or rather shape coexistence, because there are many cases in which the different 1 sigma contours in the beta gamma plane may have large overlaps. And then is this coexisting? What is that? This is food for thought. And with that, I thank you a lot for your attention.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alfredo. Let's give him a round of applause. So questions I see on the chat. I see Marco Rossini has a couple of questions. Shape fluctuations are obtained also from T-plots in Monte Carlo shell model calculations and from collective wave functions in beyond mean field calculations. But you can read the chat, right?
Yeah, I can start. I can.
So could you comment on that?
The comment is just that indeed, in the case of the T-plots, what they have, they don't have a measure of that. They don't have the real measure, which is the only one, which is the fluctuation computed with the they put the form points in the gamma beta plane, and this gives a visual idea of where are located the solution. But they have not yet. They could do it. This is they can do it. At the end, they do a shell model calculation, and they can implement what we do, and they have a rigorous measure of what is the fluctuation. They have all the information, and they can do that without problem. Indeed, in people using the Gaussian code, etc., and Jack Henderson or Kasia or many others, have many people tries to use these invariants from the experimental. This is the next thing, right. And this is well done, and we have worked with them. The only thing is that that the fluctuations in gamma had never been rigorously computed.
But Marco has another question, which is very, very valid. So he say, why don't you compare your calculations with results from multi-step Coulomb excitation, where you can get these rotational invariants and get beta and gamma at the same time?
In some cases, we have.
Can I have a comment?
See, we did that with Kasia papers in calcium 42. Yeah.
42,
And,
okay, yeah.
we haven't done that in other cases, but we can. Well, we have the numbers.
Right. Julian?
Yeah, thanks, Alfredo, for your talk. I remember about 10 years ago when we talked about calcium 42, so it was complete misunderstanding of our languages. So
yeah.
I'm very glad that now you use the same language of expectation value of quadrupole invariance. So I think it's the only measure of deformation which we are able to make.
But we have converged in one thing, which is my important message is in many cases the fact that you get a beta and gamma may be meaningless if the fluctuation is big enough.
No, you are completely right. That's why I always try to stress it. It's expectation value of quadrupole invariance. So
absolutely.
At the moment, our information is limited because if you like, for example, to measure the dispersion in triaxiality, we need an enormous amount of data. So I think that sometimes we discuss it in Kazimierz and Christorostat, or maybe it's worth to run one accelerator for at least 1 year to get all needed information, because it's really enormous amount of data we needed. So in my evaluation, it's about 5 PhD theses, if you like, at one cases to measure it with good accuracy. But
that's why doing it with this method takes nothing. It is true that it happens in the world of the cell model calculation, but if you have a big enough cell model calculation, this gives you a very nice indication of what is happening.
I'm talking about experimental.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's why we really need a lot of information to go to this 6th order invariant. So because it's
right.
a lot of. So up to now, it was nearly no such information. In one case, we are lucky that it was just stiff triaxial rotor, and then we found that it's probably stiff. But about softness, it's really a big problem. And of course, then we need a big collaboration to attack this problem. But anyhow, I think it's important that at the moment, all theoreticians use this language of expectation value of invariance, that now we can communicate between experimentalists and theorists, and we can compare different approach and so on. So thank you very much for this progress in these cases.
Thanks to you.
Thank you.
And my apologies if 10 years ago I wasn't so aware of that.
Thank you.
So we have more questions from Ramon. Ramon, do you want to ask yourself?
Yes, please.
Ramon?
He has disappeared, but I read that he's telling that.
Yeah. I have muted myself. Now you may hear me, yeah? Do you hear me? Okay, so it was the last slide. I mean, when you mentioned about the overlap in the gamma beta plane, I don't think that's really a sensible thing to look at. It's more, I mean, what are the underlying configurations? I guess also shell model, I mean, even if there could be a sizable overlap in the gamma beta plane, I mean, they're really different due to the underlying configuration in terms of particle hole excitations. And then, I mean, you have the orthogonality coming from that.
Yeah. But the only comment to that is when you take your 0 pluses in nickel 68, huh?
Yeah,
these 0 pluses are obviously orthogonal, huh?
Yeah. Right.
No problem. But it is when you try to move into the intrinsic frame that things start spreading out, and I don't know. I simply, it is clear in my transparency of that the prolate and the oblate don't overlap. So I'm happy with that. Huh? It was more in this more delicate stuff, which is the difference between a spherical and oblate, which is something that has been always there. How do you really distinguish between a soft oblate, not very much deformed, and an spherical? This was the food for thought. I don't have any answer.
Jack, can you ask Jack Henderson?
Well,
Hi,
Alfredo. Yeah, thanks for the talk. I mean, I agree with all of that, most of it. The point, the question I had was more that when it comes to discussing spherical shapes, if you take the canonical kind of spherical vibration picture, which has been around for ages, like Bohr's spherical harmonic vibrator, then you also get a beta that is larger than the delta beta, just naturally, because beta is restricted to being greater than 0. So I agree with if you take a beta gamma in the beta gamma plane, because beta is a modulus by definition, it kind of you always end up having a beta that is greater than the distribution of beta around it. So I agree that it's a poorly defined shape, but I think it's actually almost consistent with the kind of canonical picture of a spherical vibrating nucleus, with a kind of soft surface as well.
I say I was really just putting that.
Yeah, I know.
Semantics, and but the funny point, contrary to Bohr, etc., is that the central point is not at 0, not even close to 0. It's very far from 0.
This is if you take it won't be at 0 if you take the same approximation. You take the same.
No.
Sorry, if you take the central. Yeah, well, it won't be, because beta is by definition positive.
No.
Yeah, but this can be positive at 0.01 or 0.02.
Oh no, for sure. I mean, but I'm saying that it will always be positive and it will always be larger than the.
What is mix everything? As you have a perfect double magic like calcium 40, and if you use the right thing, as you know, it turns out that beta is even if you take the full-fledged double magic closure, huh?
Yeah.
Then, well, that I jumped very rapidly. But I had the calculation of taking calcium 48 completely closed. Then the quadrupole operator acting on that will make just particle whole gap. Huh? And then you don't have fluctuation. The fluctuations in this limit are 0.
Yes.
0. And beta turns out to be 0.12.
Yeah, okay.
So,
that's a strange one.
Small comment to your question.
Wait, Julian, we need to carry on. I know this is very interesting, and we take your point that we need to measure practicality.
Yeah, sure. Get with me privately. I will make comment because I think it's a wrong approach.
Say it to everyone. Say it to everyone. We can keep this.
Yeah, you have to remember that invariance is beta square. So
yeah, that's what
nothing more. And then even you have a vibrator, so the potential is minimum around 0, but after 0-point vibration, your first ground state it's much higher, and then the expectation value of beta is of course 0.1, sometimes 0.2.
Yeah.
So
this
it depends how soft it is. So
this is what I'm saying. I'm saying
that vibrator, it means mean deformation 0. It's completely not true.
This is what I'm saying.
It's minimum potential. It's not this one which we are able to measure.
This is what I'm saying. I'm saying that because it's beta squared, whatever you get out will always be positive, which means that the central beta value will always be positive.
That's why
it can't be 0.
Beta and gamma, because
that's what I'm
it's two-dimensional, and that's all.
Yeah.
It can't be limited to beta.
Okay, Julian, thank you so much, Alfredo and Jack and everyone for your comments. Let's move on, because otherwise